In this very lesson, we shall be looking at the inverse property of operation on real numbers. Remember, we are still on the real number system and we are still on the properties of operation on real numbers. Before we begin our lesson, let's revise ourselves on what we did in our previous lesson. In our previous lesson, we learned about the identity element for addition and the identity element for multiplication. So we said that if A, given that A comes from the set of real numbers, then A plus the number 0 gives back what? A. And this 0 is called the identity element for addition. We also learned that given that A comes from the set of real numbers, then A multiplying 1 gives back what? The original number A back. And 1 becomes the identity element for multiplication. So 1 becomes the identity element for multiplication. We are going to make use of this identity element in the inverse property. To start with, let's start with the inverse property for addition. The inverse property for addition. Now, the inverse property of addition is also known as the additive inverse. The additive inverse. Now, the additive inverse of a number A, is that number when we add it to this A gives us the identity element for addition. Now, the additive inverse of a number A is that number that when we add it to A, it gives us what? The identity element for addition. And we know that the identity element for addition is what? 0. That is the additive inverse property. Now we are going to look for the number or the variable that when we add it to A, it will give us 0. What do you think that number or variable will be? I believe you are saying negative A. So A plus negative A will give us what? 0. Now let's take it that you have 2 plus what number will give us the identity element for addition, which is 0. I believe you are saying it is negative 2. Let's also take it that you have the number 5 plus what number will give us the identity element for addition, that is 0. I believe you are saying minus 5. So minus A becomes the inverse, additive inverse of A. And negative 2 becomes the additive inverse of 2. Negative 5 also becomes the additive inverse of 5. So whenever they ask you to find the additive inverse of a certain number, it is just the opposite of that very number. So if you have 10, the additive inverse of 10 is what? Negative 10. If you have 3, or let's say negative 3, the additive inverse of negative 3 is what? 3. Because negative 3 plus 3 gives us what? The identity element for addition, and that is what? 0. So that is that for additive inverse. I believe you are following. Good. So the next one that we are looking at is the inverse property for multiplication. It is also called the multiplicative inverse. Multiplicative inverse. Now the multiplicative inverse of a number A is that number that when we multiply that number that when we multiply by A gives us the identity element for multiplication. And we know that the identity element for multiplication is what? Is 1. So the multiplicative inverse of a number A is that number when you multiply by A gives us what? The identity element for multiplication. And we know that the identity element for multiplication is 1. So we are going to look at this. What number will we multiply by a to give us 1? I guess we are saying 1 over a. We have 1 over a, because 1 over a will give us what? 1. 1 times 1 over a. We have a times 1 will give us a over a. And this will cancel this. We have 1. I guess you are following. So let's take. So if you have the number 2 times what number will give us the identity element for multiplication, which is 1. What number will you multiply by 2 to give us 1? I believe you are saying it is what? 1 over 2. Because 2 times 1 over 2 gives us 2 over 2. When we cancel, we are getting 1. Good. Similarly, when you have a number, let's say 10, what number will you multiply by 10 to give us 1? And I believe you are saying it is what? 1 over what? 10. Because 10 times 1 over 10 is equal to 10 over 10. This will cancel that. We have 1 over 1, which is the same as what? 1. Good. So if you have a list of numbers and let A represent those numbers, multiply by its inverse or its reciprocal gives us what? The identity element for multiplication, which is 1. So the multiplicative inverse of A is 1 over A. The multiplicative inverse of 2 is what? 1 over 2. So the multiplicative inverse of 10 is what? 1 over 3. What about the multiplicative inverse of 25? It's still what? 1 over 25. And that is that. I believe you are following. Good. You see, we have been making use of these inverse property day in and day out in our arithmetic operation in mathematics. But just that we have not taken note of that. Now let's take it that you are being given a simple linear equation such as now assuming that you are being presented with a simple linear equation of this very form, what will you do? How will you go about this? I believe you say that we are going to do what we call transposition, meaning that we are going to move 3 to the other side of the equal sign to become negative. Those at the KG or the GHS level will say that 3 will cause the equal sign to become what? Negative. They will say 3 will cause the equal sign to become what? Negative. But 3 does not have legs to work and cause the equal sign. But in actual sense, what we do is that we find the additive inverse of 3. And we have learned that the additive inverse of 3 is what? Negative 3, because it gives us what? The identity element for addition. So the additive inverse of 3 is what? Negative 3. Very good. So this is the additive inverse of 3. Now we use this additive inverse and then we add it to both sides of the equation. So we are going to add negative 3 to both sides of the equation. So we are going to get 2x plus 3, then plus the additive inverse is equal to 5 plus what? The additive inverse. So we are going to get 2x, 3 plus minus 3 will give us what? Plus 0. And this will give us what? 5 minus what? 3. So 2x plus 0 will give us what? Still 2x, which is equal to 5 minus 3. That is what we do. So I've been telling my student that Any action that we do take in mathematics is either backed or supported by laws, rules, properties, axioms, theorems, and so on. We don't just take an action for taking sake. It is backed by all these things. So this thing that we normally say that 3 equals the equal sign, we group like term transposition, it is backed by the inverse property. I believe you are following. Good. Let's continue from this side, right? So we have 2x is equal to what? 5 minus 3 will give us what? 2. Very good. Now, at this point, what do we do? I believe you are saying that to find the value of x, we divide both sides by 2. So we divide both sides by 2. Very good. But in actual sense, what we do is that we find the multiplicative inverse of 2. We find the multiplicative inverse of 2. And then we use that multiplicative inverse of 2 to multiply both sides of the equation. And we have learned that the multiplicative inverse of 2 is what? 1 over 2. So we are going to use this inverse to multiply both sides of the equation. So we are going to get 1 over 2 times what? 2x is equal to 1 over 2 times 2. So that when you simplify, we have 1 times 2x will give you 2x all over what? 2. 1 times 2 gives us 2 all over 2. Then you can find the value of x. That is that for the inverse property. This brings us to the end of today's lesson. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.